Hi, Ken. I'm Sarah from The Upcoming.
Oh, Sarah,
Thanks so much for taking the time to speak with
no
us.
problem.
Um, Shame we can't be there in person, but
I
good that
know.
we can at least speak
uh,
virtually.
Yeah, we're still going. We have to keep going all the time. Never give up.
Indeed. So, for people who aren't already familiar with your film,
Mm.
Ultraviolence, maybe you could just give us a brief introduction in your own words. What can people expect when they come and see this film?
People can expect to see the story of violence in terms of police killings in the UK. They can expect to see the struggle of the families of the people who have been killed by the police to get justice. And they can expect to see a film which is reflective of the times we're in and that gives some hope for the future as well.
And it functions kind of as a follow up to your
Sure.
2002 film, Injustice. So, what was it that prompted you to think, sort of 2 decades on, I suppose,
Mm.
now is the right time to kind of revisit that same theme? And how does it kind of link with back to Injustice?
Sure. Well, we didn't want to make this film. Um, we only made this film because there was no improvement from the state after Injustice was made. When we made Injustice, we were hoping that it would shift things, and it certainly did politically and in terms of awareness in this country. But the fact that the deaths continued after the film, as we knew they would, but we were hoping that police officers would end up getting taken to the Crown Court rather than the facile inquest system we have in this country. So when we saw that happening, we decided to start filming again. We picked up our cameras in around 2003, 2004, which is still when Injustice was being shown. And we didn't really know, as we did with Injustice, we never knew where the film would go. We just start organically. In fact, we never knew Injustice would take 7 years to make, and I'm quite surprised this has taken a lot longer. But I think we just carried on because we felt things were happening that had to be recorded, that were important for the kind of collective memory of this country. And we thought that one day we'll put it together in a film with images, as we say in the film.
And just to quickly revisit Injustice, I
Sure.
mean, it was sort of famously had the Police Federation threatening to sue anyone who showed it. And
Yeah.
I guess it effectively meant migrant media and yourselves and Mahmood were kind of blacklisted in some respects. So
Yeah.
looking back at that time,
Mm.
how do you feel about how that all unfolded, and how does that compare to the context which Ultraviolence is being released into now?
Yeah. When we released that film, we were really inspired by what people did to get the film shown, because every time the Police Federation threatened the cinema with a legal action, somebody in the audience would just get up and say, well, I work in a school, or I run a community centre, or I have this place. And we would literally walk down the road with that person and show the film the very same evening. And we did that for a few months. And of course, the Police Federation did get the message that they couldn't stop this film. When we won that battle, we were hoping that the broadcasters in this country would take off where we began, and to take on the Police Federation. And of course, they refused to. Famously, Channel 4 and BBC refused to show Injustice, despite all its its success at festivals and that it was sold all over the world. It's never had a broadcast in this country, and so that was pretty disappointing. And so today, the context today is different. I hope it's different. I mean, certainly politically, deaths in police custody, police killings are being talked about by everybody. The whole country is aware of the issue. I don't think the whole country is aware of this issue in terms of the UK. I think they're more aware of it in terms of what happens in the US. And so what this film is hoping to do is shift the focus.
And I guess when you were making this film, you could not have predicted, the aftermath of the George Floyd killing and the
No,
resurgence of Black Lives Matter. And
sure.
like you say, this focus now and dialogue that we're seeing about those issues. But maybe, as you say, we've still got there's so much attention on what's happening in the US, and a lot of people perhaps thinking, oh, well, that's not really an issue as much here in the UK. So,
Yeah.
not knowing that was all going to happen, has this brought even more relevance to your film coming out now?
Well, I think it's extremely timely, and that's partly luck. But I think we could have released this film 10 years ago, or in 2016 when BLM first kicked off, and it would still have that kind of resonance. I think we're living in a time today where the interests of young people in issues around race and environment and gender are really, really strong. I don't know how that's happened, because that's throughout the whole country, and we can't just put it down to, you know, environmentalism or issues around race. It's just in the people, it's in the young people. And I think that's what makes this time really different, and that what makes us hopeful. And that's why we kind of made the film, because obviously we started editing 4 or 5 years ago, so we had no idea this would be happening now. But it could have happened 100 years ago, or it could happen in 100 years' time. It would always be relevant until this issue is dealt with.
And you know, both films are shocking and challenging to watch, and in some
Yeah,
respects it is incredibly bleak and depressing to think
yeah.
that these issues continue. But do you have a sense of optimism, and do you see a sense of hope in the film, like you say, of thinking there is this next generation who
Mm.
will be out on the streets protesting and will kind of be resisting that status quo that seems to have stuck around?
You're exactly right, and I think we have to look at the history of what's happening around policing in this country, and it's really interesting that Steve McQueen's film Mangrove 9 has come out now as well, and that's partly, I think, to do with the climate we're in. But before the Mangrove 9, if you told a court in this country a police officer was a liar, you would be thrown into jail yourself. It took the Mangrove 9 to convince the people, the whole population, officers can lie. If you fast forward to the Bradford 12 young Asian guys who were accused of terrorism for defending themselves by making Molotov cocktails to fight the far right who were invading Bradford. They went to court and they were found not guilty. So they established the right of self-defense. The Stephen Lawrence case around police racism. So you can see there's a trajectory of improvement, of people standing up to injustice and winning. And I think death in police custody is the final hurdle. So I know it will come because of history. I'm just not sure when it will come, but I have.
And I guess in this film we also get like a glimpse of kind of your personal
Yeah.
journey, and so maybe you can just talk a little bit about your process, like how you go about piecing together, you know, the news footage, CCTV tapes, and then these interviews with the families. And perhaps, you know, what are
Yeah.
some of, were there some really, what was there a moment that you felt that was like the most challenging, like perhaps speaking with those families, and then other parts of it where you did feel a sense of hope from speaking to these people?
Wow, Sarah, that's about 10
Oh,
questions.
sorry.
It's okay. In terms of the process, I have a relationship with Brenda because of the Brian Douglas case was an injustice, and then other people we met along the way. Migrant media works very collectively and organically. And so there was never, we felt things when the families felt them. So there was never anything that was shocking to us because we were going through it at the same time. I think in terms of the process of filmmaking, the film is quite simple in a way. It's a chronology of a certain period. I think the complexity comes in the looking back, in the historical knowledge that we have as people of our age making films as documentary filmmakers, because we're aware, obviously, of 1968, of Vietnam. Young people aren't aware of that now. And so it's important that from generation to generation, the key incidents from those periods are retold again and again, because we can't forget that there's always been a history of people fighting for rights in this country and internationally as well. And we try to keep that notion of resistance going. And I think the notion of resistance comes into the filmmaking as well, because even though we talk about victims, they're spoken of in a way which is about fighting back. The families are always organizing pickets, or they're, organizing cultural events. And the film tries to reflect on those moments of resistance, and I think just people talking about the cases in the way they do and explaining how they feel and making the accusations they make and the images that you see, this is all part of resistance.
And in that sense, what do you hope the impact of this film will be? Do you see it as a call to action to people who see it? And how does it feel to have it here at the London Film Festival, which, like you say, got Mangrove showing amongst other films? It does feel like a fantastic platform to be putting out messages like this.
It's an absolutely fantastic platform, and I think the London Film Festival has recognised that there's a whole kind of social movement going on, which is why so many of the films they're showing speak to these kind of issues. So it's wonderful to be part of the London Film Festival, and we're really grateful, and it's good that it's part of a movement of consciousness building that's happening in this country. And I think you've touched on it before in terms of young people, in terms of hope. We just want this film to be there for now, for tomorrow, and for 10 and 20 years time. When you make films, it's not just about the present, it's not about how people feel now, but it's how it can influence the future. And hopefully the film will get widely seen, as Injustice was, and can feed into what's happening today and be part of progress.
Thanks so much. Congratulations.
Yeah, no worries.
Best
Thanks.
of luck with it here at London. Thanks so much.